My name is Bill Saunders. I am Director of a program in human rights connected both to the Institute for Human Ecology and the School of Arts and Sciences. As part of our program in human rights, we have a Master of Arts in Human Rights, and we have our first class. Some of the students are here, and any of you who are interested in it or have friends who are interested in it, at the check-in table at the door, you can get more information about the program. I'm happy to talk to anybody who's interested. We're starting to look into recruiting our second class right now. Another part of the human rights program is the event tonight, which we have an annual lecture discussion on human rights. Last year, this is the second, the first was with Robert George. Probably many of you came to that. I discussed with him the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and modern kind of human rights discourse. What's right about it, what's wrong with it, how should we think about it? And that issue is behind our Human Rights Master of Arts in Human Rights, which is interdisciplinary program, so it looks at human rights from philosophy, theology, politics, law, culture, tries to give a rounded understanding of human rights, particularly with the richness of the Catholic tradition. And that conversation is available on the Institute for Human Ecology's webpage if you'd like to watch it. Robert George, of course, is a professor at Princeton and was the past chairman of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. So this is our second lecture conversation, and it's about human rights in China. Now we know that just recently we observed the 4-month anniversary of the current protests in Hong Kong. And also recently, a couple weeks ago, we observed, or we were aware of, the 70th anniversary of the Communist Party in China. Just this week, the general manager of the Houston Rockets tweeted a simple message: "Stand for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." The Chinese Communist Party and the government immediately protested, and the statement from the Chinese government said in part, quote, "Freedom of speech does not include freedom to criticize the government," end quote. The NBA, National Basketball Association, began to apologize. NBA players for the Houston Rockets team began to apologize, and the discussion goes back and forth. The National Basketball Association is very popular in China. There's a huge market in China, many millions of people who watch basketball, and one of the most famous NBA players is a Chinese player who's 7 feet tall and is now president, as I understand it, of the Basketball Association. So even just a couple days ago, this was in the news. Now let me say a word about Tiananmen Square. Unless you're at least 37 years old, which many of you are not, although many of us are, but many of you are not, you certainly are not aware of having lived through what happened in Tiananmen Square, because that anniversary also came recently, the 30th anniversary since Tiananmen Square. So what happened in Tiananmen Square? I hope all of the younger folks were taught about it in school, but in case you weren't, or to refresh your memory, let me tell you a few things. What were known as the protests in Tiananmen Square in Beijing began on April the 15th, 1989, following the death of a pro-reform general secretary of the Communist Party. Many students, fearing that the reforms would be halted or rolled back, began protests demanding greater government accountability for many things, more constitutional due process, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. At the height of the protests 30 years ago, there were probably 1 million people involved. In response to this protest, the State Council of China on May the 20th declared martial law and mobilized thousands of troops. On June the 4th, the troops advanced into Beijing and onto Tiananmen Square. They killed demonstrators and bystanders by the thousands, and thousands more were wounded. Tiananmen Square was crushed. If you were alive at the time, you have images you'll never forget, for instance, of the one man standing in front of a tank. The world protested. There was an uproar after the crushing of this pro-democracy movement in China. But what's happened in China itself? The Chinese government made widespread arrests following the crushing of the demonstrations. They suppressed other protests throughout China. They expelled foreign journalists, and they strictly controlled domestic press coverage of the event, and they demoted any officials that were sympathetic to the protests. So it's been 30 years since then. What's happened? Well, part of it we can glimpse in the life of our speaker tonight, Guangcheng Chen. He was born in 1971. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. He's certainly one of the most remarkable people that I have ever met. He became blind as a very young child due to an untreated illness. As he says in his book, he sometimes says he was blinded by communism. And he was blinded by communism in the sense that although the Communist Party proclaimed over and over and over what it was doing for the people of China and all the great things it had done for the people of China, the fact was it wasn't even providing basic medical care. And he had a high fever and an illness. He couldn't get it treated, and as a very young child, he lost his sight. He grew up among the rural poor, surrounded by brutality and injustice on many levels by government officials who were simply not accountable for what they did, who used power in unjust ways. For instance, taking money from farmers and others whom they had no right to take the money from, or in his case, in his village, building a paper mill up the river from his village so that the water in the village became unfit to drink. Over time, Guangcheng became familiar with Chinese law and helped educate the farmers and villagers to their legal rights under Chinese law, protections guaranteed to them by Chinese law. In addition, he was frequently sought out by disabled Chinese who were generally ignored or mistreated. He initiated lawsuits, class action suits on their behalf. He was recognized worldwide as one of the leading barefoot lawyers. So that accounts for the title of his book, The Barefoot Lawyer. If you haven't read it, I'll tell you more about it. You should get it. You should read it. But he was known as a barefoot lawyer, which were people who had some training or understanding in the law and who used it to help the rural poor and others claim their rights guaranteed under Chinese law. So he helped Chinese citizens to claim their rights. He was featured as a barefoot lawyer actually on the cover of Newsweek magazine. In 2005, Guangcheng uncovered the merciless and illegal one-child policy of forced abortions. He was denounced by the Chinese Communist Party as responsible for thousands of births that mothers wanted, but the Communist Party did not. He was imprisoned on trumped-up charges, held for years, and then returned home, but placed under, again, illegal house arrest, illegal even under the law of China. He had guards surrounding his house 24 hours a day, rotating teams of guards. There were guards throughout the village in which he lived. There were guards surrounding the village. There were guards at nearby villages. They were all intended to keep him in his place, and his place was in his home with no access to anybody, no news, no visitors. In fact, when anyone tried to visit him, the guards treated them roughly, forced them away, including a very famous actor we all know who played Batman, Christian Bale, who tried to come to see Guangcheng and was roughed up and forced by the guards to leave. The only support Guangcheng had was his family, particularly his wife, Beijing, who unfortunately is ill and can't be in here tonight. But with Beijing's irreplaceable support, as recounted in this book, this man, blind, escaped. He escaped with guards all around, guards whose only job was to make sure he stayed in that house. There was one moment, he and his wife planned it for 2 years. There was one moment when the only guards who could see him could see into their living. There were 6 guards. 2 of them had a direct line of vision. One of them got up and stood for a few moments, and in that moment, Guangcheng and Beijing moved. They moved out of the house across the compound, and he had to wait and listen. I can't do this account justice, except it's the most amazing thing I have ever heard. She had to go back to the house. So a blind man who, if anybody sees him, is going to be captured. If the wrong dog barks, literally, if the wrong dog barks, they'll get him. Had to go across several yards, compounds with walls. He had to get up and over walls. Now, they had planned this for years, and he also has this incredible ability to sense things, and his memory is very sharp, and he can remember things once they'd talked about where things were. But imagine how difficult. I mean, I would have said it's impossible. But is quoting him from the book. He says, "I knew every bit of terrain around my village in a million ways besides sight, the patterns of sounds, the mix of smells, the organization of space." And so, over a very harrowing several hours, he finally worked his way outside the village. When he got outside the village, he had to get to the next village through the woods, through a path he dimly remembered from childhood, where he had friends who could help him. Every step, every moment, any time anyone saw him or heard him, they could turn him back in. It's an incredible, amazing story, and he had friends, and they arranged to take him to the U.S. Embassy. He was well known around the world. Like I said, he had been on the cover of Newsweek. He was known as the leader of these Barefoot Lawyers who were trying to help the poor and the disabled and other folks in China. And eventually, although he wanted to stay in China, he came to the United States because he could not be sure of his own safety, much less that of his family. Now, since he came here, he's worked ceaselessly to promote democracy in China. He is now a distinguished fellow here at Catholic University, and we thank President John Garvey for that. And he is able to find ways around. You hear about the internet walls and the censor walls. He's still able to get information into China. He has tens of thousands of followers. The Chinese Communist Party wishes he would go away, disappear, be fat and happy in America. Forget about the people in China. But he won't do it. He's got an iron will and a determination to promote democracy in China in every way he can. And I now will turn it over for him to tell you the situation in China 30 years after Tiananmen Square. Chen Guangcheng.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Yeah. Thank you. Greetings. Today, I am going to talk about human rights in China 30 years past Tiananmen. Human rights have declined, and today are very bad. The Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, is afraid of losing power. Anything that threatens its power will be a target for violence and oppression. The CCP will use any method to achieve its goals. After the democracy movement was crushed in 1989, the CCP jailed many students and protesters. Families of people killed in the massacre have had neither apology nor compensation for their pain and loss. Many families have even been persecuted for speaking out and seeking justice for their children killed in Tiananmen. The government controls all mention of the democracy movement of 1989. So many Chinese young people do not know about it. In the earlier 2000s, many people like me started using the law to try to protect people's rights. This has been called the rights defense movement. The CCP responded with prosecution. For my work, I was kidnapped, disappeared, imprisoned, and jailed in my own home for nearly 7 years. I was beaten and had everything stolen. My lawyers were beaten brutally when they tried to visit me. I am here today only because I escaped. But others, many friends, have not been able to escape. On July 9, 2015, the CCP began detaining lawyers and activists across China. This is now known as the 709 crackdown. Over 4 years after it began, many lawyers and activists like Guangcheng Chen, Zhou Shifeng, Wu Gan, and Hu Shigen are still in prison. Those who have been allowed to go home say they were beaten, tortured, threatened, psychological abused, and forced to take unnamed drugs. The families of these lawyers and activists are also persecuted. Li Wenzu, wife of Wang Quanzhang, searched for over 4 years before she was allowed to see her husband. She said he had clearly been the victim of torture and much abuse. Many ethnic minorities in China are persecuted. Over 1 million Uyghurs have been placed in concentration camps, and many are being secretly shipped via train to other prisons in China. Over 150 Tibetans have self-immolated in protest of the treatment of their people at hands of the CCP. Christians are persecuted, and churches and crosses are torn down. Falun Gong are detained and tortured. While the CCP propaganda machine denies all of these things, many Chinese people know the truth. The internet cannot be completely controlled after all, despite massive censorship. The Hong Kong people also know the truth, which is why they have been protesting for 4 months. They see that Beijing wants to control Hong Kong completely and take away freedoms like freedom of speech and freedom of the judiciary. I think the Hong Kong people will continue to fight. The U.S. government and the U.S. people should support Hong Kong. Beijing is very worried about Hong Kong because they are afraid people in mainland China will be inspired by Hong Kong to protest the CCP. Many people in mainland China are not speaking out openly about Hong Kong, only in private chat rooms online. But they see, and in their hearts, they support Hong Kong. to control the Chinese people. The CCP has made a massive surveillance network. Inside China, over 2 million cameras around the country use facial recognition and movement recognition to track people. Online, the authorities track comments, delete information, and shut down accounts. Outside China, embassies are watching Chinese students in US colleges. Some students are either paid by the CCP to be informers, while other students are afraid to speak freely while in class. This is just one way that the CCP is trying to erode freedom of speech and academic freedom in the US. No one wants to live in an unfree place. The CCP likes to see that universal values are not universal, that freedom and democracy are not Chinese. This is wrong. All people want to be free. Chinese people want to be free. Even Communist Party members and their families want to be free, which is why they want to come to America. The Chinese Communist Party is very strong now. Is it possible to fight them? Will China have democracy? I believe it is possible to succeed. Of course, it is extremely difficult. The vast surveillance network is a blow to the democracy movement and is a huge weight on people's psychological well-being. However, I believe that what determines outcomes is people. As long as you have confidence and determination and know that justice is on your side and thirst for freedom, you will find the path to overcome your enemies. The quest for freedom is innate within all of us. As oppression grows, so does the will to fight back. Protests are happening every day across China. The protest in Hong Kong has now been going on for exactly 4 months today. More than half of the population of the city has come out onto the streets, it is clear that the sons and daughters of China want freedom. We hope that Americans and other people living in free countries can help us. Let us take hands together and bravely stride forth to throw the communist authoritarians in the waste heap of history. Nothing is impossible. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Should I move this one? Okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask him a couple of questions, and then we're going to open it up for you to ask questions, and we'll give it, try to give everybody a chance. I'm sure you'd like to ask him about certain things. First of all, I wanted to ask Guangcheng about the rule of law in China. Is it respected?
No. Under authoritarianism, there is no rule of law. China's political system is a party-state system where the party controls everything. The role of the Communist Party is written into the Constitution. The government is like a puppet that the party uses protect single-party rule. The Communist Party makes all decisions about who is appointed to government positions. And at every level of authority, party committees and party secretaries have the real power. Whether you are talking about the premier of the country or a local village mayor, any government position is beholden to the party secretary of the level. This is why there is no independent court or legal system in China. The judiciary obeys the party. The media is controlled by the party. Corporations are controlled by the party.
So how does this affect ordinary people? How do they experience this?
Because there is no rule of law. Regular people cannot use the law to protect themselves because there is so much corruption. Officials do bad things and are not punished. For example, party officials might want some land to build a scraper to make lots of money. So they take the land from villagers. Sometimes villagers are very upset and they don't want to leave their house, and they are buried inside their homes when the bulldozers come, because they cannot use the legal system. Many people will try to petition the government when something happens. They travel a very long way to go to Beijing to ask the central government to help. The central government doesn't like this and will sometimes beat petitioners. I tried to petition the government to get taxes returned to me that they had stolen from my family. Instead of helping me, they just told me to go back home.
As you mentioned before, many people like myself have a phone that uses facial recognition technology for me to open my phone. Say another word about how facial recognition technology is used in China.
Yeah, that is very important. Yeah, the CCP uses facial recognition and other technologies to spy on the Chinese people. The CCP has put up over 200 million surveillance cameras throughout the country and uses artificial intelligence systems from Western countries like facial recognition and movement recognition to track people. If they see you are seeing things they don't like, or you are being critical of the party, they will harass you and maybe put you in jail. How long depends on how mad you make them. The CCP also uses surveillance to do things like keep activists from leaving their home around sensitive times, like the anniversary of Tiananmen.
Tell us, how does the Chinese Communist Party view religious people?
Okay, the CCP does not like people to have belief in anything but the party. They are watching Falun Gong people, Christians, Uyghurs, and Tibetans. In the past few years, the CCP has taken down over 1,000 churches and crosses. This began in Fujian and Zhejiang, and then spread across the country. They have locked up over 1 million Uyghurs in Xinjiang, and will install surveillance software in your cell phone when you travel there. The CCP will do anything to prevent the Chinese people from having freedom of thought and freedom of belief, because this threatens their power.
Tell us about what the CCP is trying to do in the United States.
Okay. Yeah, maybe a lot of people don't know about this situation. Yeah. The CCP is extending its fingers around the world. It is trying to influence democratic countries, especially Western governments, academia, media, and corporations. The CCP is buying time on radio stations and putting up big advertisements in places like Tiananmen Square. It buys stock to influence media companies. It uses officials who act like business people to influence American politicians. Chinese embassies use Chinese students to police other students from China, to keep them from speaking out. It uses Confucius institutes to control what people say about China on American campuses. The CCP uses money to accomplish its goals. For example, U.S. colleges have little money, so the CCP orders funding through Confucius institutes, but in exchange, the colleges have to sign contracts that limit what is said about China.
So you have described a pretty dire situation in China. Many people in the room will be familiar with it, but many of this will be news to them. So my last question to you is, tell us, is there any hope for democracy in China?
Oh, yes, sure. I believe there is hope. Many people in China are very angry about the Communist Party, and they talk a lot on private social media chat rooms. Many people are risking their lives to change China and to bring progress. They suffer a lot, but still they keep trying. This is why I have a lot of hope. The CCP tries very hard to control people, but people are fighting back, even against surveillance. For example, many people are using cell phones to take videos of police violence and corruption, and they share this online. In Hong Kong, people are using facial recognition to locate plain clothed place in the crowd. Many people outside of China are working very hard to develop software to get over the firewall. Also, the US is now starting to fight back against the Communist Party. For example, the US is using the trade war to stop the CCP from harming the US. The US government now says CCP media companies have to register as foreign agents. The US government is also stopping Huawei and other technology companies from becoming a part of the US communication network. Colleges are shutting down their Confucius Institute. More and more people in America are starting understanding. But I want to remind everyone of something that is very important. The Chinese Communist Party is not the same as the Chinese people. I believe in the Chinese people. The Chinese people are good, like American people are good. Only in China, our system is bad. This is what I want to change.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So,
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
So we'll take questions from the audience. I guess we have, Michael has a microphone if you would like to ask a question. I can't quite see. It looks like there's one in the back.
Thank you very much for your talk, and
Thank you.
above all else, thank you very much for your fortitude in the fight. My question is, in listening to your talk and hearing about the just how totally controlling the Communist Party is, my fear is for the Catholics in China and the agreement signed by the Vatican recently, and the struggle that brought to light by Joseph Zen, Cardinal Joseph Zen, about the Communist Party influencing the church in China. And I'm wondering if there's hope for the church in China, given this agreement, that the faith first might continue, and then second, that it might remain at all free from communist influence in order to help the people further.
他的问题是，梵蒂冈跟中共签约了，他是担心在中国大陆的天主教徒这么严厉的控制，你作为天主教徒还有希望吗？你评论一下。
我觉得有希望。首先呢，对于梵蒂冈与这个魔鬼立约这件事情，我是持反对的态度。
Yeah, I think it's still hopeful for Catholics in China, even though Vatican has signed this bad agreement with Communist Party. There's still hope.
我想中国的天主教徒也好，世界的天主教徒也好，相信的是上帝，而不是梵蒂冈。
I think the Catholic in the world believe first the God, not necessarily the Vatican.
3 years ago, I had the opportunity to travel to China, and needless to say, I was extremely amazed. One of the things I noticed in the cities, but not while I traveled to Tibet, and I didn't notice all of the people, but some of the young people, some of the people seemed extremely happy and more affluent. I also noticed a lot of development taking place, and I thought that there was one advantage that the one-party system may have, is that it got things done. For an example, the high-speed train. While in our country, the democracy, we're still, not sure of how to proceed. So I have two questions. One is, are there any advantages that you might note in the one-party system? And secondly, have you noticed has the emerging capitalism helped at all? And if so, in what way?
3年前到中国去看了，跟年轻人谈，年轻人有一些年轻人很快乐，坐高铁啊这些事情啊，他有2个问题哈，一个问题就是你看这个就中国是有没有这样子发展的情况哈？What's your second question?
Emerging capitalism assisted in any way? And if yes.
那么这边的这边崛起的资本家，能不能帮助这个事，或者是负面的影响？
我觉得呢，实际上中国前边30年，中共耽误了发展之后呢，这个部分的解除松绑之后呢，确实经济上有了一定的发展。
My observation is that the first 30 years of the communist ruling, the economy was terrible. When they released the bondage of the tight control of economy, the Chinese economy has some improvement.
对，我觉得实际上到中国去的人呢，多数都是到大城市，北京、上海。那有人说中国是2个中国，一个城市中国，一个农村中国。实际上，中国农村的状况真的这些年来改变的并不是那么大。
Many travelers or tourists visit the cities, Beijing, Shanghai, or other major cities in China. There are actually 2 Chinas in there. One is city China, one is rural China, which are quite different.
对，所以我觉得其实西方的这些资本家呢，他们在有着非常大的商业道德或者说责任来推动人权。那么在中国呢，实际上如果我们没有这样的一个法律来限制他们把高科技卖给独裁者来监控人民的话，他们很可能为了赚钱会和独裁者一起同流合污来监控人民，当起帮凶的角色。
The Western capitalisms with money, if they can have a moral duty to not to assist the dictators to crack down on his own people, such as high-tech transfer to China becomes these severe civilian techniques to control Chinese people, then there will be hope. But in his observation, that's looked like the rising capitalism is helping the ruling elites of communists in China.
对，我觉得美国的商业这些跨国公司，如果站在这个正义的一边，肯定会有对中国的民主、对世界的民主都有很大的帮助。
Yeah, you think the Westerns, the capitalisms, if can stand on the justice side or right side of the histories, will definitely will help Chinese people or the whole world to get rid of the communism.
Thank you.
Others?
My question is basically, what do you think about Xi Jinping and his position of strength in the Chinese Communist Party? It seems like he's faced a pretty tough year and faced a lot of challenges with Hong Kong and the trade war and some other issues. Do you think that within the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party, there are divisions about his leadership, and do you see support for him as continuing? Thank you.
就是你对这个习近平的看法，就是面对反中中还有贸易战， 那么党内也有分裂的声音，你对这个习近平的一个看法？
Yeah, I think if the authoritarianism is still there, or Xi Jinping, or Wang Jinping, or Li Jinping, everyone become the Communist Party's leader, still will use the violence to prevent democracy. 对，我觉得其实呢，党内分裂是一件好的事情。可以说，共产党在利益上的这种纠纷发展到你死我活的程度的时候，对于中国人民来讲，就拥有更多打破专制铁幕的机会。
Yeah, he speaks English very well, right? The later part he speaks Chinese. Yeah, he think that if there's a divisions of within the Communist Party, the power struggle between two sides, that will be a good news for Chinese people because that will lead to a more opportunity for Chinese people to take advantage of this power struggle, very serious power struggle, to at a certain point so overthrow this dictatorship.
Thank you.
Hello. The narrative that we hear all the time, you've already discussed, but that is as China becomes more liberal in terms of its economic interactions with the rest of the world, the better things will be for human rights. You've gainsaid, and rightly so perhaps, that position. But what about the opposite? There's a whole body of criticism in the West about the Chinese economy not being as strong as it's claimed to be, the numbers being fake, the GDP numbers, reserve capital numbers being faked constantly, and that there are certain people predicting the demise of the economic prosperity of the new China. If that were to happen, how would you see that having an effect on the human rights struggle? In other words, instead of an ascendant China, a quagmire China, a recessionary China, a China whose economic activities have been challenged and hamstrung in ways that might not seem likely right now.
他说，如果中国人民有人权啊、自由，这当然非常好，跟世界结合起来。他看这个中共的情况，经济很不好，很多数字 GDP 啊，这些都是假的。那么你是什么看法？如果说中国的经济一直往下滑，那个这个 Chinese 就中国人跟那个世界上的关系是怎么样？
我觉得中国的经济实际上绝大部分这种盈利或者说利益，都被共产党这个专制系统当中的这个家族或者是党的这个系统拿走了，普通老百姓得到的利益非常非常小。
I think the economy in China, if there are revenues being grabbed away by the ruling elites of Communist Party members, not being benefited by the people much.
所以呢，我觉得中国的经济如果出现问题，首先受到伤害，或者说受到伤害最大的，当然就是中共这个专制系统当中的人。
So if there is a serious problem of the economy in China, everybody suffer, but the people suffer the most is the ruling elite in the systems.
那么西方的市场对于中共来说就是命，那中国的市场对于西方人来说不过是钱而已，所以这个像美国这个市场有着绝对的优势，有着绝对的主动权来掌控中共的经济命脉。
Yeah, the market of United States to communist China is a life debt situation to them, but the market of China to U.S. is only a matter of some money. So U.S. really at the upper hand control the dominant factors about the economy of China, can do something about it.
所以呢，从来没有过真正的中美关系，只有共美关系。所以未来要想改变这样一种状态，从根本上改变的话，就需要真正建立起中美关系，让中国人民和美国人民能够有机会多接触。
In his observation, there has been no Sino-U.S. relations. It's only the relation between ruling communists and United States. This is wrong. If United States can establish a relation with Chinese people, American people has relation with Chinese people, not the ruling governments, then there will be a lot of hope.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else?
Thank you very much. I have two issues I would like you to comment on very quickly. The first is the fact that China is devouring the African continent right now. If you could comment on that. And then secondly, Xi Jinping has said that he wants China to become the world superpower to displace the United States. And I wondered if you could comment on that. Thank you.
中共已经把非洲差不多都买了。另外，习近平说要做世界的 superpower 超级强国，你的看法？
痴人说梦。
It's a very quick question is a daydream of Xi Jinping.
How about the Africa part?
Yeah， 所以中国，你想想，你中国要想做世界的领袖，你首先自己要做的正确，被大家接受，对吧？中国推行孔子学院，孔子有一句著名的话叫“正者正也，子帅以正，孰敢不正？”这孔子说，就是政治本来就是跟正确要连在一起的，对吧？你自己如果带头做得好，跟随你的人自然也就会好。可是中共现在是一个邪恶的代表，是撒旦的转世，是一个魔鬼政权。他要把全世界都带向魔鬼吗？都带向地狱吗？这怎么可能？
Well, this part is more difficult. Yeah. So he said it's the daydream. It's because to become a superpower in the world, you need to earn the respect from the world. Earn the respect. Then you need to earn respect not only with powers but also with your integrity. To be a righteous, good person of good country. This is totally opposite. He quoted the Confucius saying, the political leader, the first very basic things to have is the upright integrity. Okay, then if the leader of the politics is not upright with respect to the integrity, how can you lead the country too? How can you lead the whole world? And he thinks that Xi Jinping and the communists are the Satans and the evils. You want to lead the whole world to hell or not? 讨论一下非洲。
OK，我觉得呢，这个中共实际上投入了很多金钱，包括大外宣，对全世界进行影响。其实对于非洲的收买，除了这种基本的资源之外，最主要的是很多非洲小国家在联合国有投票权，他可以利用他们的投票权在联合国里去为所欲为，去破坏文明世界的国际秩序。这是他为什么要花钱，那否则他在联合国里就没有立足之地了。
Yeah, the communist China is buying out Africa has been for years. Primarily through the propagandas to the investments. The reason is every country has one vote in the United Nations. The communist China need those votes, so they've been working on those small countries in Africa for many years.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much, and refreshments over here. And thank to our translator, Sin Nai, who is a professor in the School of Engineering. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.